spirituality that works, engaging your church through significant living. Many have said today that we are saturated by media, and there are so many voices that are impressing upon us from so many different ways. And in my ministry, I've worked with multiple groups of people, from the college student to the senior citizen to the middle-aged man, the young woman who is attempting to complete probably a doctoral dissertation or such. And all of them are asking some very similar questions of their lives and where they are right now. Questions like, for the college student, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my meaning? So I had an opportunity to do a weekend retreat, one-on-one, with a woman who was in her 70s. And her primary question was, how can I be useful now in my church? What's my purpose? I still want to be involved and engaged, but so many things have changed around me. So the midlife man was finding that, yes, he's worked and worked and worked all of his life, probably being more motivated by providing for his family. But now at a point in his midlife is wondering, kind of the song of What's It All About, Alfie? Or the one that we're familiar with, Is That All There Is? Asking those questions are common to all of us, and they come at different stages in our lives, and we ponder them. Well, I think that there is an answer to that pondering that we do receive from our own spirituality and as Christians. We find ourselves sometimes, and I'm trying to make a balance between not being in the way of the screen, ourselves feeling pretty small in this vast world. It used to be that the world was right around us, and then maybe a little further out we'd reach into other sections of our country, but now living in a global society where we're connected with people who are all over the world. I'm playing games with folks who are in Sweden, and I didn't know where he was until he started chatting with me. And I had to do the translation with Google, and I was able to chat back in his own language. And we were able to communicate like that. Well, it's easy to begin to feel that the world is so large, and we're just one person in it. Through these means of the media, how many of us are on Twitter? How many of us are on Facebook? How many of us Google or do an internet search at least once a day? We watch CNN, MSNBC, maybe Fox News. We're connected in so many ways, and it's all compressing upon us. We get our pictures off of Flickr and Tumblr and all those other sites that are available to us. And in the midst of all of this, we have a sense of, well, who am I? What am I here for? And how can I make a difference in this world? So to that question, we also find that the research says that children nowadays spend 6.3 or 6.5 hours a day being involved and engaged in some kind of media, whether it's their Facebook, whether it's internet, MP3 players, however they get connected. They're more immersed in the media than we are. And we're all not very far behind. And so we ask the question of what is the challenge of this for the church? Is the church simply one voice among all these other voices, the chatter and the noise that takes place around us? And we can choose to remove ourselves from it, but anywhere you go, whether it's billboards that run across the signs out as we're driving, we are compressed by it. And so as we ask ourselves what's the question or the challenge for us, the challenge for us becomes, what is the basis of our significance? How do we find ourselves living lives of meaning, of purpose, that really do go beyond what our titles are, what our title is on the door, what our business card says, how many social groups we're a part of, or even if we have any acknowledgments or merit that gets recognized, it goes beyond those kinds of things when we talk about a personal kind of significance, because those are all signs of being important. And some people do really thrive to be important, but as we find today, importance is fleeting. You can go to your job and be important one day and the next day be unimportant. Or maybe even we're disimported. I don't know, maybe that's a new way of framing it for what's going on today. One day we have our name on the door, we have a placard on our desk, we have business cards, we're all connected. We might even have a corporate car. And then the next day we're leaving the office, getting on a bus. Our importance tied to those status markers are fleeting. And I believe that in our culture, in our society now, people are yearning for something more meaningful, more significant, something that's lasting, that's eternal, something that makes a difference. I believe that for us, Eldon Fry said that people are the basis of our significance. It's not so much that we get the appreciation of people, but our significance is based on our ability to touch one of God's creation in a personal way. And we leave that open with creation because there was a turtle that was beaten by a golf club by somebody on a golf course. And that turtle was taken to a turtle, habitat shelter to try to rehabilitate it. And someone put up a reward to catch the person who beat the turtle with a golf club. And I've heard that reward in a matter of hours went to $6,000, and then $10,000, and then more than that, $15,000. The turtle died. After the turtle died, the reward grew even exponentially. Some might say, but that was just a turtle. But that turtle is one of God's creations. So what I believe is there is a connection between our spirituality and our personal and spiritual significance. There's a connection between our sense of place, our sense of purpose and meaning. And that becomes very critical for us because I believe that makes for good discipleships. Good disciples are living significant lives because we are leveraging our capacity to touch one of God's creations in a personal way. When we look at some of the models, persons who have done this, who have lived this, the book will be looking at, for example, Martin Luther King Jr., who made the statement that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. I believe it's our service, our ability to serve one another, to serve God, that gives us significant living. And in the church, when we can engage people in service that stems from their spirituality, then we have the ability and capacity to have a live and vibrant congregation and church life. When we look at other models like our own, Joshua Morikawa, whose balance between faith and inclusiveness drove him into a place of understanding that ministry is not just for those who are ordained. Ministry is for all. That all of us are ministers wherever we are, in our workplace, in our community, whatever we do, in the marketplace. His inclusiveness, and he worked for that. The book will say more about it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who talks about from his own sense of spirituality and community with ethics and building community. We talked a lot. We're talking in the Mission Summit. And a lot of those conversations are around how do we experience community today and now, being engaged in community. Dorothy Day, in her work and sacrifice, and being among and working for those who are poor. And then we have Fannie Lou Hamer with her own spirituality of faith and prayer. Fannie Lou Hamer, who instrumental in the Mississippi Voters' Rights Movement, who once was meeting with the Democratic Party, a committee of the Democratic Party. And it was in the time that Hubert Humphrey was running for president, or vice president. And she was meeting with him, and she said, Mr. Humphrey, if you are afraid to take this position and help poor people, then I'm going to tell Jesus on you. In other words, she was saying, I'm going to pray for you. And she told him that, if you are not going to work on behalf of poor people, then you may as well not take the job. If you're going to be afraid, don't take this office. We'll look at Fannie Lou Hamer, who was famous for saying, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And often it is that soul fatigue when we're brought to that place that we begin to say, I want to live more deeply. I want to live on the edge of faith and risk. And my discipleship calls me out to be involved in touching God's creation in a personal way. So where do you fit in? You fit in right there. We fit in right there among those people because they were ordinary people who did the extraordinary thing, which was living their deep life, their spirituality, and their discipleship. When we look at significance, we know that Jesus said to his disciples in Matthew 20:26, he was saying to them, if you want to be great, whoever wants to be the greatest among you must be the one who does what? Serves. Our spirituality and our service go hand in hand. Our spirituality is not one that only benefits us, where we pray in our closet, where we worship privately, where we have no external expression of those disciplines and our spirituality. But our spirituality calls and drives us to go and get engaged in our surroundings. That's what it did for these models that we looked at. What Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was involved in was a spiritual involvement. What Fannie Lou Hamer, she did it as a woman of the church, doing women's work that sent her out and being involved in the voters' rights. What did they have? They had conviction, they had call, and they had a deep sense of community. And I'd add another C, they had commitment. So they had a conviction that what they were involved in, engaged in, and what touched their hearts, what they became passionate about, there was a conviction that that's where God was too. They had a call, one that couldn't be denied. We heard there was one of the speakers earlier in our sessions, talking about if this cup could pass from me. How many of these models that we put up on this screen probably had that prayer, if this cup could pass from me. But a call is when there is something that has embraced you so deeply that it becomes something that you cannot not do. We're compelled to do it. And then community. That we don't work inwardly and in isolation, but we live significant lives among others and with others, working with others, connecting with others, in groups, in committees, in task force, in teams, out in community among people is where we're called. Jesus said, what? Go. Go. Living a spirituality that leads us to be present and engaged in our surroundings and not removed. Present and engaged. The Passionaries, when I was at the breakfast this morning, read the description. Like, that's it. That's exactly what we're talking about. There's something so passionate, so capturing of your heart, of your mind, of your spirit. It's a soul thing that you want to work and serve and do and touch one of God's creations in a very personal way with your hand, with your finger, with your own body and presence. All the people we look at as models were physically present. And so one of the difficulties we have with our society and media saturation is that it's so distant, isn't it? So removed that we can be engaged and never leave our homes. Well, is that real engagement? Or is engagement when we roll up our pants legs and we step into the muddy waters, where we get our nails dirty, and when we get ourselves immersed in that which we are called to do, to be involved in our surroundings in a personal way. So the importance is of strengthening the connection between our spirituality and our sense of personal call and spiritual significance. Living life significantly, so that makes for the church today the work of disciple making that much more critical. Because I believe that this is being a disciple, being engaged, being involved, taking responsibility, serving our communities and our world around us. So the work of disciple making is that much more critical in our time. We've heard mentioned earlier at another session about the nuns, those who have been identified as non-religiously affiliated. Well, one of the things about the millennial generation for the church, when we look at where is their opportunity for the church today, there is so much opportunity with that generation. But not only that generation, because they have been identified as being socially minded, civically engaged, spiritual, perhaps sometimes skeptical about formalized religion. But they are more closely identified with the boomer generation who were what? Socially engaged, social-minded, seeking social justice, pretty much though engaged in formalized religion. But a conversation between those two generations, skipping over the Gen Xers who are in the middle, can happen more readily. And I told my students when I was working with them that you have more in common with me than you have in common with the 32-year-old who is in my office. So when we look at spirituality that works, it is about our serve. It's about being involved in the world. And as I close, I'm reminded that when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was thinking about the close of his day, whenever that would come, and of course we know he had a sense that it was coming. And he talked about what he would like to have said at his funeral. And he said, don't say of me that I had all these degrees, I did. Don't say that I got the Nobel Peace Prize, I did. Don't say that I attended all these Ivy League schools, I did. Say about me that I tried to help somebody. I tried to feed someone who was hungry, clothe somebody who was naked. I tried to help somebody who didn't have a home. Say about me that I tried to serve. That's such a motivational from one of our spiritual ancestors. So my premise is that the church is called to equip and ordain people to make connections between their Christian spirituality and their capacity to touch one of God's creations in a personal way. That is the call of the church today. And ordain is in quotations because remember, one of our other spiritual ancestors, Judson, the ministry of all of God's people, commissioned or sent to do what God has called you to do as ministers with your work in the world. So I'm reminded, I'm closing now, I'm bringing it in, I'm reminded of a song that we sing in my church tradition. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I could cheer somebody with a word of song, if I could show somebody that they are traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. Spirituality that works, engaging your church through significant living.